So like Mickey said, my name is Selma, and I'm a queer Palestinian organizer living in the city of Seattle in the United States. And just to kind of contextualize myself in this struggle, I really want to share something that's really important to me, which is that my Palestinian identity is really a diasporic one. As a daughter of a 1948 refugee, the presence of exile has always been an integral part of my core. And this isn't too different from my experiences in relation to my own queerness, which oftentimes feels like a continuous construction and deconstruction of some idea of home. One outside the four walls that I'm told is a safe one that I can call my own. My family's forced migration landed us in the state of Washington, another colonized land, where I was taught from an early age that assimilation was our key to survival. My eventual separation from that was oftentimes fueled by conversations I had with other folks of color, many with exiled experiences of their own, who instilled in me the art of discernment, which I will talk about more in a little bit, and the false promises of the American enterprise. So today I kind of want to share really one main thing and then a refess that happened last spring in where I live in Seattle that was critical because it centered the voice of queer Palestinians. It was really, really a big success. And then I'm going to wrap up with just some thoughts on self-determination and safety and how it relates to the Palestinian struggle. So just to give some background, there was a tour that was planned a year ago that was to take place in the spring of 2012. It was titled Rainbow Generations, Building a New LGBT Pride and Inclusion in Israel. The tour was sponsored by the terrorist organization Stand With Us and also by the Israeli consulate. And it was scheduled to take place in 3 major Northwest cities in the United States: Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia. They were to share their innovative work about queer organizing in Seattle and make connections with their US counterparts. And the plan was really to target faith groups, universities, youth centers, all culminating in one large panel to take place in Seattle, hosted and sponsored by the City of Seattle City Council through one of its diversity advisory organizations and councils called the LGBT Commission. So a group of activists, many queer, including some folks in the queer Arab community, as well as many anti-Zionist Jewish allies, had organized around the work that was being done in the Pacific Northwest, and word had come to Seattle that the events in Tacoma and Olympia were canceled. We were thrilled, but to be honest, I didn't have a lot of high hopes for Seattle, because it was hosted by the city council. It was a little bit more institutional, and as many of you know, doing Palestine solidarity work, you learn to grow a really thick skin and to keep your expectations proximate to what's been happening. So a group of us in Seattle, many, mostly folks in the queer community that have already been involved in challenging kind of anti-assimilationist actions in our community, were inspired to conduct a similar shutdown. A day prior to the event in Seattle, which was hosted by, like I said, the City Council, which is the heart of city government, there's nothing larger, the commission was holding their monthly open meeting, to where I, along with a couple of other queer Palestinian organizers and some anti-Zionist Jewish allies, attended the meeting. And we beseeched the commission. We really wanted to share our words in one last-ditch effort to really cancel the event. So we were there. I'm so used to doing so many more kind of on-the-ground guerrilla tactics that talking to a commission, I really did not expect much change. But there I was with shaking hands, clear fervor about how the commission really failed me as its constituent. I was told, like many of these people have said many times, that queerness and Palestine work were completely divorced from one another, and that any sort of queer organizing on a city scale was completely apolitical. I told them about how my life in Seattle was not a coincidence, that I was there due to forced migration, and that to me, my exile was completely tied to my queerness. While these stories appeared to affect folks in the room, it seemed like the event would still take place. But then something really extraordinary happened. My vulnerability was unleashed and slowly became to seemingly cue other folks to partake in their own sharing of their own vulnerability. With tears in his eyes and a voice shaking with emotion, one of the commissioners said that he had felt that he had made a huge mistake because he had no idea that holding this event meant marginalizing and invisibilizing Palestinian queers. Many other commissioners described their own naivete that they agreed to host this event and the subsequent confusion. I jumped in to share that their confusion was not a coincidence. and that the pinkwashing propaganda was designed to obscure the truth, one example of the insidiousness of Zionism. I shared with them that by being courageous enough to cancel this event, they would not be doing a solitary, this would not be a solitary action, and that they would be joining many other international and national leaders by saying that they will not be manipulated as LGBT folks to whitewash Israeli war crimes. So we pushed for a vote. I still can't believe this as I'm sharing this nearly a year later. And I was shaking as 6 out of the 8 commissioners raised their hands in favor of canceling the event. So we were elated and blissed out. And like I said, you learn to grow a thick skin and learn to not expect much. And I had thanked the commission that by canceling the event, they were really privileging a voice that is not given space in many rooms. So, of course, something to note is that success does not come without major, major backlash, and that's what we received in the Pacific Northwest, most definitely. There was a letter that was crafted by many gay organizations in Seattle. Just to give a kind of a hint, Seattle Counseling Services, which provides mental health resources to the queer community, Lifelong AIDS Alliance, which provides a range of case management and community organizing for not only folks affected by HIV/AIDS, but also folks with chronic illness. $3 Bill Cinema, which hosts the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival in Seattle. So a whole range of groups that seemingly would not come out in defiance of the cancellation, which again speaks to the insidiousness of the Zionist project. The city council, in response, held a city council meeting, invited the heads of these organizations, as well as the anti-pinkwashers, including myself, to come. And one after one, each city council member berated the anti-pinkwashers and publicly apologized to the panel, saying that they would want them to come back. Despite this major backlash, which still continues today, the queer community in Seattle really banded together, not just around the success, but also around the fact that it was a queer-powered movement to decolonize Palestine. See, for us, those 7 or so major gay organizations that sided with the pinkwashers, they didn't represent us or our voices. Our call wasn't for a place at the table. Our call was for a dismantlement of the system that proposes that a place at the table is the only way to survive. I was asked by one of the people in the LGBT Commission if I had a place at the table, if I as a queer Palestinian was on that panel, would I still support the event, would I come? And I think there's no better way to describe my answer than to quote my friend and my colleague Haneen in what she said yesterday about my aim is to specifically and intentionally disconnect myself from any paradigm that is related to apartheid. Many of the queer activists that became really enraged and activated by this event did not find it foreign to their actions. They're people who really link Palestinian solidarity to indigenous sovereignty actions and all people who are affected by colonialism. These were the same people that for around the same time for weeks were scheduling actions against a bill that would spend multi-million dollars of Seattle tax money to build a youth jail, claiming that it would be rehabilitation. And together we said, we don't want a nicer jail for our young people, and we don't want pink handcuffs that violently undermine our struggle. So to share some reflections when I think about how this was a queer Palestinian-led movement, I really think about the word self-determination. And when thinking about, let's say, the anti-violence movement, it's kind of often been crafted that the end goal is safety and some idea of safety. And in that process, unfortunately, dominant schemes or visions of safety have been constructed by dominant voices and kind of sold to those who need safety, many poor, many people of color, and many indigenous. And I truly believe that this destructive model can only shift through supporting the agency and self-determination of those folks and those surviving violence and occupation. So the fallacies of safety is not the means supporting the self-determination of the people is. Queer-powered BDS was successful because it centered my voice and the voices of my queer Palestinian brothers and sisters. It critically challenged the marketing of safe space in the Middle East, which is the project of pinkwashing that my panelists spoke about. And it disrupted the narrative that safe spaces are something that can be produced, marketed, and sold. And it inserts alternative narratives of self-determination. And it pushes us to practice discernment. It pushes us to continually question who gets to control the parameters of our liberation, who gets to name Tel Aviv as the hub, who gets to name a room as a safe space to be and to thrive. So I believe this type of centering, along with practicing critical discernment, is just one of many ways to forge a more meaningful movement.